We're going to talk about the promoted teams again, which is quite natural. We've given mine and Matt's background in covering the Championship. And I've written down a question here, and it says, it's a rhetorical question, so don't answer it literally. Will the promoted teams have 0 wins going into the first international break? Matt, I know this is not a new conversation, and we don't want to reiterate and regurgitate old narratives about the cliff edge in finances between Championship and Premier League and how difficult it is. And last season obviously didn't help with Luton, Burnley and Sheffield United all being relegated in year one. But with that being said, you mentioned already a Leicester defeat at Fulham. And I've already mentioned the need for Leicester to look at Fulham, who might be in the middle. They're probably not going to be in the top 6 or top 8. Can you take something? Can you get points against teams in the middle to drag yourself up? Because if not, go figure, Matt, who are you going to score any points against? And if that number of teams is too few, then even if you do get points against them, it's not going to be enough to keep you in the division. Leicester go under 2-1 at Fulham. Ipswich, okay, and I'm hoping you're going to give them a pass because it's been Liverpool, Man City away with De Bruyne and Haaland scoring a hat-trick, and arguably it's the hardest game of the season, Man City away, isn't it? The worrying one, and you mentioned it in Matt's moment, is Southampton had a home game against Forest, who last season were 17th. So they're like the team you want to, lead lowest ranked team that is still in the Premier League from last season. And as you've mentioned, handily beaten. Before I set you up, I'm going to give you the 3 fixtures next week. It's Brentford versus Southampton. It's Ipswich at home to Fulham, who Leicester have lost to. And maybe we need to give Leicester a pass this week because it's Leicester at home to 4th place from last season, Aston Villa. So you can elaborate, but the core of what I want to know from you, Matt, am I going to be seeing 0 victories going into international break number 1? Please don't say yes.
I hope not. I'm probably about 50-50 on it, Ben. The fixtures do get nicer for the 3 of them this week, maybe not so much for Leicester. We'll start with Ipswich, who I don't want to put all the pressure on them to go and do it, but I personally fancy that one to be where we could get the first win. But look, the difficult thing with Ipswich is they lost 2-0 to Liverpool and 4-1 to Man City. It's so hard to read those games and try and translate them to a game against a mid-table team because it's too easy to say, oh, they're no good, or, oh, they've played top teams. We can't say just yet. The game plan will be completely different because when you go away to Man City, you're not going to play the same football you would at home to a Fulham. I think we're going to see a more adventurous Ipswich. That said, let's still give them credit for getting a goal at Man City. And more than that, could have even had a penalty. I thought they did what they could in a game which we just think is a write-off in this division for a newly promoted team. The business is still coming through for Ipswich, so will that be a case of players need to gel? Will they grow?
Might be a striker in before the weekend as well, because the deal with Broja looks like it's fallen through or might still be something there. But that said, Matt, Kieran McKenna's dripping them in very slowly, the new signings. I think it might be post-international break, but sorry, continue.
No, you're right. You are right. I mean, I would just love to see them get something against Fulham. And by that, I mean a win. A draw would be okay. You get them moving. But in this division, because, as we say, you don't necessarily need exactly a point per game, but you need just under it. If we say 35 is probably what you need. They've lost to Man City and Liverpool, which you kind of expect them to, but then they need to get something at least at home to Fulham. So it's one of those where is a draw enough? Time will be the best indicator to see if it is. I would like to see Ipswich go for it, though, because we saw how good they were in the Championship, and they've brought in some of the best players from the Championship, in Jack Clark in particular, and Sammy Smodics is up and running. So fingers crossed for Ipswich. I am going to be keeping an eye on that game, and you're going to be going to that one, I believe, aren't you?
And fingers crossed. I need to run that past HQ at some point this week. Have you got any hope for Southampton going to Brentford after a really disappointing couple of early losses? When you factor in the red card at Newcastle and the missed opportunity, and as you mentioned in Matt's moment, the manner of the defeat at home to, you're talking to me about 35 to stay up. That number goes up if the bottom three are going to be losing home games to all the supposedly mid-ranking teams.
Exactly. You don't want to let those teams get away from you, and Brentford might be in that conversation. It's not impossible for Southampton. I'm not sure, though. What we haven't seen from them this season is them scoring. And I wonder if they score first, do they keep the ball? Do they keep it away from Brentford? Could they frustrate them? I'm just not sure. Brentford were good against Palace. They got a big win there. Lost 2-0 to Liverpool. It's not the end of the world, is it? With the home advantage, I do fancy Brentford. But like I say, I will say that's not impossible for Southampton. But even if they don't win and don't get a draw, you want to at least see them get a first goal before the international break. And then as for Leicester, it's an interesting one against Villa. As you say, Villa, good team. Yes, they lost last week, but it's to Arsenal. You'd make Villa favourites. But I just wonder, with it being a bit of a Midlands derby as well, and
That's
what
true.
we saw from Leicester against Spurs at home, if they stay in it, it's a case of, as we've said before, if you go 1-0 down, just keep yourselves in it. Maybe towards the end of the game, you chuck it forwards and maybe snatch a draw or possibly a win. I think that's where Leicester have an advantage as opposed to the other two teams with Steve Cooper. I think it's about that Premier League experience. That will, of course, come for Russell Martin and Kieran McKenna. It's a difficult game, once again, but I'll say that's not impossible. None of them this week are playing a top 2 or 3 teams, so I wouldn't say it's impossible that any of them get a victory.
There you go. What we'll do 2 things, Matt. We'll clip that one out so you can get your comments on that one. I'll do a poll as well, Matt, and we'll see what the audience thinks. We'll do a poll on the Benjamin Bloom Football Channel community tab to see, and I think I can make it a yes or no, can't I? 0 wins or not. And you can see Matt and I have talked around saying yes or no, but there is still a high probability that the answer to the question, will promoted teams have 0 points going into first international break, may well be yes.